Hello, scumbags. We are back here for Vote of No Confidence, continuing the post Last Jedi Vote of No Confidences. And this is one that's been asked about recently because we've had some videos come out and where certain opinions have been said. And yeah, they want us to fight it out. See, this topic is the one that's been debated in the comment section all over the place. Josh, you are my guest today. How you doing, buddy?
I am doing very well. I think this is going to be an interesting talk. We're gonna play our parts pretty well here, but this film is a hot button topic. There's a lot to sort of unpack. I don't know if we'll be able to sort of get to everything. I imagine we're sort of going to condense our arguments to a few points and go from there. But can I just say one thing before we kind of get into it? Well, first of all, I don't want to apologize because I got to hold my stupid mic because my mic stand. Yeah, it's a whole thing. But I want to say that it's okay to have different opinions about this movie. Like, that's okay. And I think that there's this thing going on right now where people are sort of being very venomous and bringing out their fangs, and they can't see the other side. And I know, right? Who are you, Mr. YouTuber guy, to say that the internet should be a reasonable place? But I would just like it if there was some discourse that could happen between people and them to accept that maybe it's okay that other people feel differently about the film. Having said that, Rob is completely wrong, and I am going to vehemently disagree with him. But it's good to be back on the show.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth for the first part, not the second part. This is what I just want to see. I want to see in the comment section below when we're going to talk about this. You're going to notice that Josh and I are going to talk about this very civilly. We're not going to start calling each other names, or at least I don't think he is. I'm not going to call him names, but we'll see. But still, below in the comment section, talk like civilly amongst each other. I don't want to see any racial remarks or anything like that. Like, in my opinion, that doesn't belong in this.
Yeah. And real quick
Nothing
too,
like that.
just not to completely side Akbar right away, but that's another thing too, is like sort of hijacking the narrative. And this is a problem I have just in general with media these days. And look, we have to be sensational. I mean, look, we understand how this all works. We understand that you want to get people's attention, right? But when you say things like, first of all, any racist attacks on like Kelly Marie Tran or anything like that, they're absolutely ridiculous, right? But I think similarly, maybe not as ridiculous, but similarly ridiculous are the people that say like, hey, look, if you don't like the Rose character, you're racist. That's crazy. That's crazy to me because I personally don't love that character, and I'm definitely not racist. So it just feels like, people are sort of making these really weird statements, and we're at this really weird place right now. So I just kind of want to say too, like, I would love for the actual discussion to be about the film and not for it to get hijacked by all of this ancillary crap that people bring on there. And I imagine that we'll get to that actually. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. So, yeah, guys, if you haven't realized already, we're talking about The Last Jedi, and specifically, what are we talking about, Josh?
We're talking about whether or not The Last Jedi is a good movie.
Yes. And with this one, I thought it was safe that we just told James, hey, put away the coin for this episode. We'll just take our sides for the most part. I fall on the side that I don't think it's a good movie. And Josh, you, of course, fallen on the side of.
Yes, I love the movie. I absolutely love The Last Jedi. But I will say that I definitely see that it has flaws. I remember we've done so much coverage on it, so much stuff.
Yeah.
That it's been sort of weird for me. And I think one of the things I want to get better at as a content creator is sort of curbing my emotions, right? Because I came out sort of wishy-washy on it. James and I did a podcast. I was sort of negative on it. Then the next couple times I saw it, I came on and I think I said that it was a masterpiece on your podcast. And I don't know, it's really one of those things where my feelings have sort of shifted on it. Now, as I sit back a little bit, I'm better able to sort of understand my feelings about it. But I will say this, I'm comfortable with saying that I love the movie and I think it's a great film. So I think it's going to be a pretty healthy conversation.
Yeah, and it's not like some people like to rag on each other for like, oh my God, you changed your opinion or something like that, or my God, you didn't have an opinion after you saw it for the first time. Like, you had to see it more than once. This is a very like difficult movie to process. Let's not forget that back in 1980, when Empire Strikes Back came out, that got negative reviews. Like that got a lot of people that just weren't sure about it. And of course, when you're going to take ballsy steps and ballsy choices, that's what's going to happen. But look at it now.
Art is divisive. I think that's one of the things that great art can really divide people. And I think that's one of the things that I'm actually going to get to in one of my points is that some of what is happening in the fandom right now is actually a good thing. And I think lends itself to the argument that this is a good movie, similar to what you were saying about Empire and that sort of thing. So, yeah, man, let's just get into it.
All right. Absolutely. Should I start with one of my negatives?
Yeah. Why don't you start? Yeah.
All right. I'm going to go right into it. I'm going to go into the point that I was hesitant towards mentioning on ranking Star Wars. I'm going to go right into the Snoke of it all.
Cool.
For my first point. So let's talk about Snoke. And, a very interesting thing that we got, it was a limited amount of time that we were only able to talk about The Last Jedi on our ranking Star Wars special.
Great
it was,
video,
we
watch it if you haven't.
Yeah, absolutely. Check it out. I believe we talked about it for like an hour and a half or something like that, all the movies, and that's 9 movies. So now to get more into The Last Jedi, more into the Snoke of it all, what I like to call. Yeah, James kind of like closed off this discussion by just asking the question: is that during the big scene, does the big Snoke's throne room scene, does that diminish Snoke, or does it elevate Kylo? I think the number one thing that I have to say is that it does both. It does both things. Like, it for sure elevates Kylo, because Kylo is now foreseen by a lot of people as more badass and less emo-y, right? Because of this movie. In a lot of ways, but still Snoke is diminished, I believe, in this movie, because again, this both Force Awakens and the first part of The Last Jedi just started setting up Snoke and raising the expectations of what this character is, right? Like, in Force Awakens, he was just this guy in the background, this big menacing figure, this person that Leia and Han said turned Kylo from the light side to the dark side. He's the one that did it. And Snoke in this movie, and I'm just taking out as this movie for Rian Johnson's movie, they started setting up things like he can connect people to the Force. Like I mentioned this part, like I consider that a big point. Like a lot of people don't see me talking about it, but I think it's a big deal, because the fact that he can connect 2 people to the Force just makes things like, imagine if the Emperor could do something like that, right? Imagine if the Emperor could just connect.
It's a huge point.
Yeah, connect himself and Anakin to the Force. Everything would probably be a lot more easier in terms of turning him to the dark side, maybe even turning other people to the dark side. Just the fact that he is able to do something that the Force itself as an entity has only been able to do up to this point is huge. And that was the thing, is that when they set up Snoke as this character leading up to this, I just kept thinking, like, oh my God, like, I want to see Snoke and Luke together. I want to see them have a scene together. I want to see more of this character and doing other things. And then that literally cut down the middle is his cut down the middle, because he fell in half. And that was it for Snoke. So my thing with this character is that they just set up so much about him. And there was a way that this scene could have not diminished Snoke and elevated Kylo. It could have elevated both in a certain way. And this was one thing that I thought about, is that to my knowledge, and in none of the other books, there has never been a dark side Force ghost. Yeah. And if they had done something like that, where maybe Snoke had wanted Kylo to do this, like he wanted him to do this, and he saw it coming the whole way, and he wanted him to kill him because that would, in a way, make him the first ever dark side Force ghost, and then up the dark side's like play in it all, like that would be huge. And in a way that, he's a decrepit looking dude, he looks like he's falling apart, like, he needs some skin cream at all times. So the fact that he was dying, and then he forced Kylo to kill him because he knew he was going to die anyway, and he wanted to ascend to this dark side Force ghost level, that could have been a way that both characters could have been elevated, and we could have seen more from Snoke, and we could have cared from the Snoke scenes. Because as of right now, as of what happened in this movie with Snoke, I don't really care about learning more about Snoke anymore, and that's tragic, because throughout that movie, I was wanting to know more about Snoke, and I'm wanting to see Snoke go into other scenes and do more things, and now I don't care about that anymore.
Right. No, I get you. I'll talk a little bit about the Snoke point itself, because it kind of leads into my first point also, right, which is about the characters, and why I think that it's such a good movie because of what it does for the main characters, which is mostly just Kylo and Rey. But as far as Snoke goes itself, like when I first saw that Snoke scene, I was like in complete shock. And what's very interesting about it is you actually see it all happening. You see the lightsaber turning, right? But it's just because of the cinematic language, especially that's already established in the film, you're like thinking in your head, there's no way. There's no way that's going to happen. And I remember, I think it was on my second or third, no, it was my second viewing. I was there with a friend who hadn't seen it before, which one of the best parts for me of all my viewings is continuously going with people that haven't seen it and sitting next to them and judging their reactions, which is another reason why I love the film. Right. But man, my buddy next to me, literally, when that happened, was like, "What?" Like just shouted like in such an earnest way that he couldn't believe it. And I remember that feeling myself, right? Because it's so interesting that you see it all going down. It's definitely a possibility. James and I had talked about it beforehand. And yet everything in you is like, there's no way they'll let this happen. And then it happens. And it's completely shocking. I would argue that moment and that whole scene is the Empire, I'm your father moment. It's that moment, but modernized. And the reason that it's modernized, and this is something that Ryan has talked about in interviews recently, he's talking about how you want to shock the audience, but it's getting harder and harder to shock the audience. Really, when you think about it, because of people like you and me, basically, we inform so many people, we dig so deep, we spend a lot of time figuring this out, and it's really hard to shock people. And I think that one of the reasons that the film is so successful is because it delivers those same types of shocks and adventure to, by the way, which are set up for hardcore fans. That's another thing that I think the movie is really, like, I almost want to say masterful again. Like, I almost keep wanting to go back to the masterpiece part, because I think that it's so self-aware of its audience and not just the like young people, because to young people, let's be real, they're just like, oh, that's the bad guy. You know what I mean? To the casuals, they're like, oh, that's the bad guy. And a lot of people have brought up online, well, you only see the Emperor for 2 films and then he dies in the original trilogy. And that's true. However, I think contextually, the way they build the Emperor is better than the way they build Snoke. But I'll say this. I think that scene absolutely serves the film, and it absolutely serves Kylo's character. I do wish, just to sort of bend and sort of see your side of things, I do wish we got more scenes with Snoke, because if I'm being honest, all the scenes with Snoke before that are completely lit. I mean, I think this dude was like, they were giving me the exact Snoke I wanted. I couldn't believe it. He's bouncing Force lightning off the ground. He's so freaking strong. Like, everything leading up to that moment, you're just like, dude, I love this character. Holy crap. Like, this dude is awesome. And I do wish we got maybe a couple more of those. I wish there was something, a little bit more of him talking about the Force, talking about the balance, Skywalker, the Jedi, some stuff that we want. And I'll say this, I do believe that we're going to get a lot of that in the novel. And for hardcores like you and me, I think that a lot of what fills this whole tapestry in for us comes from outside the films. The films serve a very strict function of kind of taking you on a story. And I saw an interview with Mark Hamill from way back in the day. I think it was in 1978. And he's talking about Star Wars, and he's trying to explain the plot. And he literally says in that interview, the plot doesn't matter. It's how it makes you feel. It's sort of a combination of a fairy tale and, Buck Rogers and, it's sort of just this culmination adventure film. And it's really more important how it makes you feel. And I think that's always sort of been the magic of Star Wars, is how it makes you feel. And that scene, look, like all great art. There's great art out there, because I went to art school. There's great art out there that's hard to look at. And that is a service. That's what you don't understand. It makes, I'm not saying you personally, but I'm just saying, like, that's what a lot of people I think miss, is that good art does not have to be satisfying. You know what I mean? It has to make you feel things, and the feelings that you have from it, I think, are a part of it. But I'm sorry, I'll let you respond to that.
Oh no. Well, yeah, it was very brief. I was just mentioning the part, like, it's a good point about the art thing. There's a reason why people go to art galleries and they literally just spend sometimes hours staring at the one painting because they want to see every detail in it. They want to see the entire picture. They want to see exactly what this artist is trying to do, and that's what the great pieces of art do. Whether this is one of those great pieces of art is to be seen, right? Again, I'm not going to throw my thing and say that I dislike Last Jedi today, and I'm going to dislike The Last Jedi in 10 years, because that would be closed-minded of me to say.
Right.
Because, I mean, I've disliked movies the first times I saw them before, and then over time liked them more, or just, partially liked the movies, and then suddenly, like, I love these movies. Like,
Right.
that's the way opinions can change. And the fact that even though I dislike the movie, Ryan Johnson put a lot of details in this movie, and whether
Yep.
it's too many details or enough details for somebody to like it, that can be seen later, because that's
Right.
where opinions
Right.
can change.
I think
But anyway,
it'll age well, to be fair. But just getting into my main point, because it sort of
yes.
segues into it, is the first reason that I think this movie is so great is because of the journey that it takes our main characters on. A lot of people are saying, specifically with Rey, that there's no arc or that there's no development, and I just look. Is there something missing from it? Absolutely. She needs a little bit more of a trial. Like, one of the things that I think people forget about the first Star Wars film is like the freaking mangled, burning bodies of Uncle Owen and his aunt, and like how that is, like, Luke can't even look at it. Luke looks at it and he has to look away. There's nothing for me here. I'm gonna go with you and become a Jedi like my father. Like, I'm getting chills just thinking about that shit. But
Mhm.
there has been sort of a kid glove treatment of Rey's character. Having said that, when I think there wasn't enough emphasis in the movie on what Luke Skywalker means to everyone, despite it being in both crawls, but despite it sort of being what the whole story's been about. There wasn't enough like of characters actually talking about it and stuff like that. It's something that, I'm working on a video right now where I talk about that. But essentially, you have this character who idolizes this dude, looks up to this dude, thinks he's going to save everybody, and she goes there, and it's one of those you don't meet your heroes sort of things. And I think that's a devastating realization for her. Not only that, but the realization that her parents are no one. I think there was a lot going on in the film for Rey's journey that's very, very important. I mean, similar to Luke's journey in Empire, Luke does not do what the wise masters tell him to do. He leaves. Because of attachment, right? And I'm reminded also of Pan's Labyrinth. You've seen Pan's Labyrinth, right?
I have, yeah.
So
Great.
the moment where, great movie. There's a moment where she has to pick the key in the little doors, and the fairy tells her to pick one door, and she just has this gut feeling and picks the other one. And those type of moments are really important to storytelling, because the hero's journey, like, a part of it is like cleaving, and you walk your own path. You walk your own path. And so Rey does that in a similar fashion. You know what I mean? Like, she takes the books, right? She takes the books after her dark side moment, takes the books, asks Luke one more time. She tries to get him to take the saber, and then she says no. And then she goes out. Now, she thinks she's getting Ben Solo because she thinks Ben is the last hope to defeat Snoke, which I guess in some weird way he was. But I think that what it does for her character and was really, really well handled. Like, one of the things I was talking to James right before you got on Skype, I was talking about how Disney was so happy with this movie. Remember how everything we heard leading up to it was like, they're so pumped about it. And I've often had thoughts recently where I'm like, well, why? Right? Because, I see the flaws. I see how the fan base is divided. And I'm like, so why was Disney so excited about it? I think that the primary function of this movie, especially like considering that it's the second installment in a trilogy, which, we have to remember, it's the second installment in a trilogy. Like, it's all going to get wrapped up, hopefully. So, one of the things I think Disney was really happy about was what it does for the relationship of Rey and Kylo. Rey and Kylo was like, how they say that Ryan just went on his own and he just got a chance to write whatever he wanted. I don't think that's true. I think to a large degree, that's true. But I think the one mandate, the one thing that Disney knew from the very beginning, and there's a lot of evidence for this, was Kylo and Rey's connection. Kylo and Rey's connection was the one thing that they knew exactly that they were going to go in that direction. And they told Ryan, hey, man, you can do whatever you want, but the crux of this trilogy is Kylo and Rey being yin and yang, balancing the Force together. They have feelings, they have love, they have connection. And when you think about that, and you think about what this film did for that, if I'm Bob Iger, if I'm anybody at Disney watching the film, I'm like, yes, slow clap, golf clap. You know what I mean? Like, you did it. You did it. Now, there's a lot of stuff in there that, maybe doesn't hit exactly right or is kind of wacky Star Wars stuff. But I think at the end of the day, what we set up for 9 and the future of the Star Wars saga is absolutely incredible. Just real quickly, because I've kind of been rambling, obviously what they do for Kylo in this film, not killing his mother, killing his mentor, which once again, I do feel like there should have been more stuff in there showing how cruel Snoke has been to this kid. The one you get it in there, it just doesn't have enough resonance, right? I mean, he's like, I've given everything to you. You know what I mean? Like, but I need more. I need a little more. But essentially, Snoke is a fucking... Oh, I'm sorry. Snoke's a dick. Sorry, I thought we were on the Den of Nerds.
I didn't hear anything.
Yeah, me neither. It's this new mic, man. I don't know. But I think that Snoke is very cruel. And I think that we were meant to feel that from Kylo's side. Kylo's trying to find his own place in the universe. I mean, like, dude, he's done what no Skywalker's ever done. He's now in charge of it all. He's got it. You know what I mean? So to me, man, that's amazing. It's a saga. It's an opera. You have these two star-crossed lovers. One now has the responsibility to restore the Jedi. One now is the most powerful dark side user that's out there and is in control of the galaxy. And to me, I think that that's why it's such a great movie. That's my first point.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting part of it because, I think in a lot of ways, a lot of people could say that, this movie was more Kylo's journey than it was Rey's journey. Like, but not by much, I would say. Like, that's where I kind of agree with you, is that Rey obviously has her own journey. Like, you mentioned the whole Luke of it all and just being mentored and not seeing that your hero is not who you expect him to be. That's a big part of this movie. And
she's one of the only people that knows that now, too. What's interesting is, to me, and not to cut you off, but the whole galaxy is now, we see it at the end with the kids telling the story about Luke Skywalker. The whole galaxy is going to continue to have this idea of Luke, right? And he comes and he saves the day again. And there's just, and yet she now has to live with sort of knowing where he was really at and yet trying to carry on his legacy. She knows now that the legacy is valuable. But I'm sorry.
No, yeah, it's true. It's like she knows the part that he was human. Everyone else thinks of him more as a god, perhaps now, right?
Right.
Just this big symbol. But yeah, you mentioned the whole Snoke part of it, like in the fact that we didn't get more enough of that relationship with Kylo and Snoke in a certain way. And a lot of things that so many people were talking about going into this movie was the fact that it's like, hey, we're going to get our first flashbacks in this movie. We'll get to find out what it was. And that was one of the most disappointing parts of the movie. The fact that the flashback was basically seeing one scene for like 30-second to a minute scene 3 different ways, right? You have first like Luke's lying type of way, then you get Kylo's version of the truth, and then you get Luke's version of the truth, right? As to what happened. That's all you really get. If they had really just stepped into it and just been like, hey, we're just gonna jump into this movie and we're gonna give you a 10 to 15 minute sequence, like just running through all of that and then showing how Snoke gets to Kylo or something like that. Just step right into it. If you're going to show me a flashback for the first time in one of these Star Wars movies, just jump into it and show it to me. Show me the entire flashback. Show me the story. And that could have been so like big and huge. And then if you wanted to, switch the truth like once or twice, like you wanted to in this movie, then go for it, right? Like, have Luke tell the story and then have Kylo tell his version of the story afterwards or something like that. Something like that would have been so much better and so much more satisfying, I think, in a way. But as talking about that point, I'm going to jump into this other point. And this is one that I mentioned on the Ranking Star Wars, but it was only very, very briefly. And ever since, people have been like, commenting, and it's fine. I embrace it, right? And I'm talking about the whole Holdo portion of this movie. And a lot of people think that, a lot of ways, like Poe was the one that was like, at fault in this type of way. I think the other way. I think Holdo is a big problem in this movie and kind of maybe the worst character in this movie, in my opinion. So I'm gonna get into that right now, and this is gonna turn into like a bigger point because again, I'm gonna try to let you guys know what I'm thinking here in terms of the whole part of it all. So if I'm going to compare this Holdo character in a lot of ways, and that's what I was thinking for a lot of this story, was that this story with Poe and Finn and with Holdo, in a lot of ways, was kind of like a storyline from 24. I don't know if you ever watched 24, Josh.
Love 24. I used to watch it with my dad all the time. Good memories.
Right. So a lot of ways, what happens in 24 a lot in these seasons is that CTU is the main type of area that these characters are at, and there's always this higher person that always seems to be like they're going against what Jack Bauer wants to do and what Chloe O'Brien wants to do and that type of stuff. And almost every one of these seasons, both Jack Bauer and Chloe O'Brien have to supersede this person. They have to do something that they don't know about because a common thread in 24 is that there's always just seems to be a mole in CTU. That's a common thing that just always happens. So yeah, I'm gonna jump off the 24 talk soon because I think I'm losing some of our Star Wars fans. But anyway, I just need to set that part up because a lot of ways these upper echelon people are either they think that they're the mole or they just think that they're making the wrong call in some type of way. So they have to do something to counteract what these people are doing. So in a lot of ways, that's what I kind of felt like Holdo was. Holdo was this upper echelon character, and then Poe and Finn were Jack Bauer and Chloe O'Brien, right? Like she fell into the category of that. I felt that she was almost two separate characters in this movie. She was kind of like this red herring person that you kind of thought was a bad person, and then was really a good person, right? Like she could literally be split in a line from the moment where Leia wakes up again. Like she becomes a completely different character from that point onward. We start off with her being very antagonistic to Poe, and then suddenly after Leia wakes up, she's like putting her hand on Poe's head, and she's like, "Take care of this guy. He's a fighter or something like that." I can't remember. I'm paraphrasing. I've only seen the movie twice so far, but regardless. Yeah, that's what I kind of like felt like with her character, and then going into the whole aspect as to the thing that people keep saying is that he's the one that's going against her in terms of he's being like he's how do I put this? He's the one that's trying to overtake her and whatnot. Like he's trying to get this stuff done. I'm having a little bit of brain fart with that word, but regardless, so I'm going to talk about
like
this
he's
part.
Antagonistic sort of.
Like he's superseding her. He's trying to undermine her in a lot of ways. And in a lot of ways that I got to talk about her and this relationship is that a lot of jobs in militaries, people don't need to know. Like the soldiers don't need to know what upper management is doing, right? And in a lot of jobs, the common work folk, they don't need to know what upper management is doing there either a lot of times. But my thing is that works if we're talking about a character like Alo Asti or the other Alo Asti that's in this movie. If one of those guys is trying to ask Holdo what her plan is, she has no reason to tell them. They're nobodies. But my thing is that Poe is not a nobody. He's literally somebody that was a key person in destroying Starkiller Base. He's the person that was trusted to go get this map to Luke Skywalker that literally the entire First Order is looking for. He was the one that was entrusted to go get this map from Lor Santega and be entrusted to bring this map to the Resistance. He's not a nobody. He's somebody that's relied upon, and he's like in a ways like he's the knight. Like, he's on the chessboard. He's the knight. He's the person he's one of the main chess pieces that you use to win the game in a lot of ways. And Holdo just talking about his character and who he is as well as a person. Like she literally calls him, she says that he's a trigger happy flyboy who's impulsive and dangerous, right? She ran down his character, right? And a lot of ways, whether you like that like that characteristic or not. That's just who he is, and a lot of reasons why. That's why he's as good at what he's doing is as he is, right? Like I'm just trying to talk to him as a person because that's what her point of view would be. So she calls him that, and this is a person that she's talking to and mentioning stuff about that. She says it herself. He just disobeyed Princess Leia because he thought that she was making the wrong call. And this is a person that he both respects and knows and likes. Holdo is somebody that he doesn't know. He doesn't know much about. Like all he talks about is her reputation in it, right? Very briefly. And this movie, in terms of if he disobeyed Leia because he thought that she was making the wrong call, what does Holdo think that this impulsive, trigger-happy flyboy that's dangerous would do if he thinks that she doesn't have a plan? I mean, again, throughout that whole first part of it, she just wouldn't tell him anything. She didn't tell him the plan. She didn't tell him anything. It's only later that he realizes, like, you're abandoning ship. So if he thinks that she either doesn't have a plan or is abandoning ship, that in his perspective could be considered as somebody that's maybe lost it, right? Like lost it under the pressure. And that's what I view his view of Poe and why she is kind of a poor character, in the fact that she wouldn't realize that the character that he is and what he just did to Leia wouldn't do the same to her. Right. That's the kind of foolish part. I don't know. I still got more to talk about this thing, but I don't know if you want to respond to that.
I'll respond a little bit. Look, here's the thing that's interesting. I actually don't like Holdo at all. No, I don't. I think she's sort of a contrivance of the plot. But I think that my thing is, I don't so dislike her or like her command or whatever that it sort of takes me out of it. Like I don't think it's so bad that it hurts the film really. I just think it's just kind of weird. Like it just feels sort of like a Rian Johnson-y thing for me. I mean, this whole movie is sort of like, honestly, plans that just don't go well, things you think are going to happen and then they don't. And it's really just Rian Johnson, right? And you never really know where you're at in the movie. Like there's stuff in here that's very like there's not really a 3-act structure, which that's a Rian thing, Yeah. And I give Lucasfilm a lot of credit. They let him make the movie. I think there could have been a lot done to improve the Holdo character. I think that, I can see both sides of it. Like, it seems really convenient that she's withholding information that then becomes a big reveal later, right? Yeah. It's almost like she was being purposely secretive just so that Poe would develop this plan and then push the plan over the top when he realized what her plan was. And there could have been, I don't want to add any more subplots to the movie because there's too many. But if there was a possibility that there was a mole, if they thought that there was a reason that they were able to track him through hyperspace other than the tech, right? And if that was just said one time, it would have made her secrecy make sense. And I got to be honest with you, there could be that could be on the cutting room floor. You know what I mean? Like, because when I look at this movie, when I look at the way Rian wrote this thing, he almost overwrote it. It's a term that I have with my comic book writers because I edit stuff all the time. Yeah. And I always tell them, like, look, if you got to keep writing to make this all make sense, like, maybe you're overwriting it. You know what I mean? Like, because there's stuff in the movie that's so, like, it just really feels like comic book writing to me because it's like, oh, this is explained by this. Did you know this? Did you know that? And it's said in exposition a lot. Now, granted, I think that it's used pretty tactfully. The fuel cell system to show you how much time has taken place. I think on paper it works really well, but then it doesn't work as well in the cinematic language because the Canto Bight stuff is so jarring and it just feels like a whole different timeline. And so I don't think it's super successful, but I think that at the end of the day, I don't mind it or despise the Holdo character so much that I was taken out of it or that was a major problem that I had with the film. I do agree with you that she's sort of a weak character. But the problem, what's interesting to me is that I think the problem one of my problem with that whole plot is that it needs to be hammered down a little bit more. I mean, Poe is arguably the reason all of this happened. And he probably should have been like court-martialed or put in a prison cell or something kind of right away. If they've lost their whole bombing fleet, because of him disobeying an order, and that's really a big deal, then I think that should have been addressed a little more. It almost felt like wishy-washy to me where like, she's like, hey, it's captain, not commander, right? You were devoted. And then, you know what I mean? And it should have been more like, bro, we have no real defense now because of your ass. You know what I mean? Like, this situation's bad. It's made all the worse because of you. Or maybe they were able to triangulate their position because of the extra time Poe took. Like, I just, it didn't feel like it was handled the way that it should have. But again, it doesn't so bother me that I'm sort of like taken out of it. You know what I mean? I honestly think there are worse things in the film to sort of talk about. I know it's just your personal thing, like that your personal situation was that Holdo was a big problem for you. Me, not so much. And another thing too, and I'm going to say this is going to upset some people, but it's the truth. I was super happy that Leia was taken out of the film for a portion of it, because Laura Dern acted the crap out of that role. Like, she's an incredible actress, and I thought her dialogue back and forth with Poe was great, because you do kind of hate her, and you're like, who's this biddy right now? Like, what are you trying to do, man? Poe's the best pilot in the world. Get out of my face, Holdo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think that's, once again, like, that's great, right? I mean, she's killing it. And I'm sorry, Carrie just really didn't kill it, like, in the movie at all. And so I was sort of glad that they took her out and allowed Holdo to play that role for the majority of the film. I was like, that's a pretty interesting way to do that. Because if you watch The Force Awakens, if you really watch The Force Awakens, they cut so much of Carrie Fisher out of that movie. There's entire dialogue that she delivers, and you're looking at Harrison's face. Now, Harrison got paid $25 million for that role, and there's a reason, because he's one of the best. And I would much prefer to look at his face that's actually acting well than Carrie's. But my point is that, like, Carrie didn't have the same magic that she once had for this character. I love Carrie to death. Carrie's an excellent person. I love the middle finger shots. She was bold. She lived bravely. She was such an icon. I mean, like, I have nothing but love for Carrie, but I just do not think that she brought back the magic. Like, when Harrison, that was Han Solo in The Force Awakens. Luke, to me, especially like in certain moments where he's talking to R2 and different things like that, with the end of the movie where he's talking to Leia, that's Luke Skywalker. And it felt right. I never got that from Carrie. And so I think that the whole idea with Ryan might have been, how do I allow this conflict? Because another problem you run into is, like, you can't have that same drama between Leia and Poe, because Poe worships her, right? So you can't have that same. So he sort of wrote himself out of that. But that's what I mean. I feel like there was kind of some overwriting with the film, and I think Holdo might have been part of that.
Yeah, it was going back to, like, one of the first things that you mentioned, the fact that you mentioned the whole thing about the mole, and, like, the fact that I was kind of like thinking 24 when I first saw the movie as well, and that's why I kind of mentioned it here, was that's why I thought they were going to too. I didn't think that they were going towards a tracking area. I thought there was a mole on this ship. I thought there was a mole in the Rebels.
Let me just ask you this real quick. Did you pick up on the fact that technology is name dropped in Rogue One when they're going through the Imperial records? Oh,
no, I didn't. I haven't watched Rogue One recently, so maybe that's why.
Yeah, at the end of the film, hyperspeed tracking. Hyperspace tracking is mentioned when they're going through the records as something they're working on.
Right. And yeah, it was funny. I was thinking about the whole mole thing for, like, the first part of the movie. And it was even that point where Leia got taken out of the movie, and then she was being taken away on that, weird stretcher, and then her tracking device dropped, and then those legs stepped into frame. I thought that they weren't going to show who that was. I thought it was just going to be somebody picking it up and somebody walking off because somebody's a mole. But no, it was just Finn, and they went down the whole.
I should probably get to my second point. Dude, James is going to kill us. He told me before we went on, he was like, just try to keep it under an hour. Sorry, James, it ain't happening.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to close off the whole
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Part of it real quick for me, because you mentioned about the whole thing that it's like Poe is like, by many people, Poe's considered to be the person that's responsible for it. That could have been court-martialed or whatnot there, right? During that whole first scene, we knew that the bombing fleet was set up. So I don't know if there was an initial plan to actually bomb it and then Leia changed her mind, because that's what it seemed like to me. It seemed like the plan was actually to bomb this thing, but
it was, yeah, I think it was Poe's. I don't know about that, brother. I really don't. There's a lot. That scene happened so fast. Like
they were ready, right? And then it sounded like.
Remember, they don't even pack their munitions, right? When they leave the planet, remember Billy Lord says, "There's no time for munitions," right? Yeah. So yeah.
But anyway, okay, I'll just close off the Holdo part, because we have been talking about Holdo for quite a little bit, considering she's such a small fraction in the movie. But yeah, it's a lot of people seem to think that Poe is responsible for like a lot of the bad things that happen here. The whole reason I'm getting into this whole Holdo thing is because I think Holdo is responsible to all the reason, because it's not Poe. Because literally, if she had just trusted this person, that's again this gigantic this knight that the rebels have, this somebody that if he just left, that would be a huge hole for the rebels. If she had just trusted that person and just told them, it's like, hey, this is the plan, then suddenly there'd be no reason for him to set up this whole Finn storyline. There'd be no reason for them to go over there and get DJ, to put DJ onto Snoke's ship, so Snoke could so DJ could tell them what their plan was, right? If all that wasn't there, then they would have literally just gone away from the ship, cloaked, landed on Crate, and everybody most likely would have survived, because the First Order would have had no way of tracking them. They would have no way to expect that anything else had happened. So literally, we're talking about all the ships that got destroyed on the way to Crate. We're talking about all the people that died on Crate, including Luke Skywalker. All those people, in my opinion, died because of Holdo, not Poe. Because if she had merely trusted him, and it's not just that she lied to Poe. Remember, she also lied to Lieutenant Connix, which is Billy Lord's character, because she was helping out Poe. So that means that she didn't even know. And what reason did she have not to know? She's working on the bridge with her. So why did all these characters not know her plan? And why is Holdo being secretive for literally like almost no reason? Unless there was, if this was actually a mole, then suddenly all my thoughts in this would be like, oh my God, okay, this completely makes sense. Her closing off information is a way to bring out the mole, or find out who the mole is. But no, it's just tracking, and that's what makes just the story a whole lot weaker, in my opinion.
Totally, I get you. Look, I get you, but you're wrong. Okay, moving on. Moving on. So my second point on why this is a great movie is because contextually it is the second in a trilogy, right? And it's also saga films. I think we all have to understand that. But look, just like Empire, when you're done with that movie, you're like, what? Like, I remember the first time being like, what could possibly happen next? Like, what? Luke's armless. Vader's his father. Han Solo's gone. Like, what the heck's happening? And I think that the goal of a second in a trilogy is always to subvert expectations, surprise the audience, and set up the finale, the third act, the resolution, in a way that it brings anticipation to its highest level and puts speculation on sort of like a scattered sort of trail. And I think this will sort of tie into my third and final point, but I think that once again, the film is so hyper aware of the place and the time that it exists that it knows that it can't go about it the same way, right? Like, Luke can't be her father. We can't have another I'm your father moment. It just, that could not work. And I think that at the end of the day, the film has a ton of conflict. The rebels get their butts kicked from literally the beginning of the film to the end of the film. They're just getting the crap kicked out of them. You have this super big military might. You have a young character who usurps the throne from the old, raggedy, powerful guy. You have a love connection established between your main hero and your main villain. I mean, honestly, and I'm being honest here. Look, I have some popular Reylo videos, and I'm going to be talking a lot about Reylo. It just so happens that's a big thread in the movie, and it's something that I find incredibly compelling. I love the idea of them having that relationship, of them having that kind of a connection, and yet being on opposite ends of the chessboard. I love it. So I think that the main reason, this goes back to the reason I think Disney was so happy with the movie, everybody behind the scenes was so happy, is because as a part two, or as the middle of a saga, right? As you know, in the 3-act structure, you have the setup, you have the conflict. The majority of the conflict happens in your second act, and then you resolve it in the third act. The meat of the story is always the second act. And to be fair, there will be a lot of second act type stuff that happens in episode 9. And then we'll get to, the resolution, whatever that may be. But I think, especially because of the day and the age that we live in, what this film does as the second act in this in this trilogy is absolutely incredible when you really think about it. So that is my second reason why I think it's so great.
Right. So this is actually a good thing that worked out this way, because this is a part of my third point and final point as to hold this whole thing. But yeah,
we didn't even
plan
interesting.
This. What's that? Yeah, we did not even plan this. That's the funny part. So again, just going off of that and going into my third point, my feeling with this movie, and part of the reason why, the fact that you got J.J. Abrams doing the first movie and Rian Johnson doing the second movie, they're very different directors. And in a lot of ways, I feel like these two don't really work as two parts of the first two parts of the trilogy, because they don't really like mesh together and come together to tell this story as well. Like, I'm not going to get into the whole Reylo stuff. I don't want to anger any Reylo fans. So I'm just going to.
Wait, you don't like Reylo?
I do not like it. I just personally don't think that that's the way they're going.
You don't think that they have romantic feelings for each other?
I think that there was a point, like I saw what the Reylo fans see, I saw in like the first half of that movie. But I'm kind of under the impression that moment where she tried to get him to turn and he tried to get her to turn and neither one did it. I thought that was kind of like the nail in the coffin to me. I thought the fact that they turn each other and they saw one way out of each other, and the fact that neither one of them turned in the other direction, I thought that was kind of the nail in the coffin. But I see what everyone sees.
That's fair.
Yeah. But so, going into this in terms of the way that Rian Johnson, one of the biggest problems I had with this movie is that in a lot of ways that he looked at The Force Awakens, and to people that like The Force Awakens, he could be saying, basically, you like that part of The Force Awakens? F you. Go that. You like that part of The Force Awakens? F you. It's going somewhere else. In a lot of ways, he was doing that to The Force Awakens. In some ways, he was doing that to Star Wars in general. I found like he was just kind of like doing his own movie and just, going with it, right? Like, this is my Star Wars movie, like it or don't like it, but he obviously would prefer that people liked it. But and it was like, Force Awakens has a big ending, right? The big ending, Rey hands out the lightsaber. There's Luke standing there. And, that's the big resolution to that movie. That resolution is now hurt because of the way that scene resolves in this movie. The fact that you just have Luke Skywalker holding this lightsaber and throwing it behind him, like it's literally like, hey, Force Awakens fans, you like this scene? Throwing it right behind him, like it's like he's doing that to the Force Awakens fans in a lot of ways. And yeah, just with the Snoke stuff, right? Them setting it up in there and setting it up in this movie. It's like an F you to that. Like, I'm going to say to myself, I don't hate the Luke stuff in it. I kind of see that Luke would become this type of character and would become this type of way. So that's not a real negative of mine. But I think in terms of the way that, in a lot of ways in a trilogy, the first chapter and the second chapter complement each other. I don't feel like that's the case with this one. They don't complement each other. It's more like, hey, the third chapter kind of has to like work off of the second chapter as opposed to working off both the first and the second chapter. It's like the third chapter now just has to follow up the second as opposed to following up the first two. So, and it's funny enough that it's J.J. Abrams doing it, who is the director of the first movie. I'm just curious, like how that's whole thing's going to work. So,
so this is an interesting point because for a couple of different reasons. I think there's a couple narratives here that kind of need separated, and they're sort of being tied together because the sort of the disjunction, I guess, or the disconnect between TFA and The Last Jedi, it's real. And but see, to me, there are things about it. There's things about the disconnect there that not a lot of people are talking about that are way more of a problem for me personally, like the Hux character. The Hux character to me is the biggest issue I have with the entire film. And the reason is because he's Hitler in the first movie and he's Daffy Duck in the second movie. That's ridiculous. Donald Gleason is an incredible actor. That speech he delivers in The Force Awakens was brutal. I remember the first time I watched it being in the theater. That scene is so gorgeous and so like heinous and evil and just totally whack, man. And when the beam comes out of the planet, it's just so crazy and so cool. And I hated the way he was portrayed in The Last Jedi. And I think that's a super big disconnect. I also feel like the Finn character, he doesn't even talk the same way in some of the scenes. And you know what else? Like when he has that thing where his gums like are like weren't working or whatever like that. I almost felt like they wrote that in because like he wasn't sounding the same or whatever. And I think there's a big disconnect there between those characters. There's little things like that I do feel that way. Now, as far as the other issue at hand, which is like the hucking of the lightsaber, the sort of subversion of what you expect. I think that Ryan, see, here's the thing. A lot of people, if you're really digging into the research here, Ryan moved to San Francisco when he was writing this film. He met with the story group multiple times during the week. So he chose to write, and this is something he talks about very honestly and openly. He chose to write a story, a Ryan story, the way that Ryan writes. And it does subvert expectations. It does sort of toy with you. I mean, he yanks the carpet out from you a couple of different times in the movie. I think that there's a lot of stuff in there that I love, like the kung fu type stuff that he sets up. There's a lot of love and old school cinema stuff in there. And if you think that the guy just went out there and said, I'm going to make my Star Wars film and poop all over everything, I just don't think you're being objective. I do not think that is what happened here. However, there's something that happens in movie making, and this is something that Lucasfilm definitely needs to curb. The first version of the script is what he worked off of. Okay. So his story was majorly written before the final cut happened in The Force Awakens. Now, there's all sorts of things that happen in movies. I think the one big example that I can think of right away is in The Force Awakens when Rey says, that's just Tito. He wants you for spare parts. No, that's not Tito. That's a Tito. Tito is a race. But because the way she delivers the line was freaking amazing, you got to take that. Now it is Tito. You know what I'm saying? And this happens a lot in film.
It's like Ash's Pikachu being named Pikachu. That's what it is.
Yep.
In Pokemon. But anyway, continue.
It happens a lot in film. At the end of the day, film is really an actor's game. And what they give you, if they give you a great take and mispronounce something, all of a sudden, that's how you pronounce it. So I think that one of the things that happened with this movie, because Ryan was brought on so early and they kind of set this plan in motion, that they weren't really able to adjust because of the way that The Force Awakens happened, right? And what they need is really like a continuity editor or something like that. They need someone to say, hey, man, this doesn't really jive with what happened in the film before. But that's sort of a separate issue from like the throwing of the lightsaber, the killing of Snoke, doing all of these things, because at the end of the day, it's the second act in a story. I think that JJ has now the opportunity to sort of JJ strikes back. They've already walked back on the Rey's parents thing, right? Because think about it, man. And this is the history of Star Wars, by the way, dude. George did not know that Leia and Luke were brother and sister, even as Empire came out. You know what I mean? So like after Empire, they're sort of like, well, we're going to do this. The your father thing, we're going to do this. They didn't know Vader was Luke's father when they wrote Star Wars.
What do you think that Yoda meant by there is another, though? Do you think? What do you think that he meant there?
Well,
just the fact that he has a sister, and maybe they didn't know that it was going to be Leia at that point. Maybe
unless
that's what it was.
No. Unless I'm misremembering this, Luke. George
Because
had
it's
an
like
idea. No. See, George, unless I'm misremembering, George had an idea for Luke to have a twin sister, but he just did not. It wasn't Leia.
Yeah, that's what I figured too.
Right.
Yeah.
It was a different Jedi, actually someone who had actually trained as a Jedi. And I forget the name of the character, but that was going to be what the third one was about. This twin girl that like arrives and sort of becomes the new hero. And by the way, too, George's new trilogy was going to have a predominant female Jedi. Kira was going to be the female Jedi. And if you even look at the art of books, which are fascinating and great reads, a lot of the stuff is labeled as Kira, Kira's staff and different things like that. So unless I'm mistaken, Rob, that's what I think was going on there. And they were.
Yeah, that's what I figured too. That's what I thought.
Because the mythology of twins is very important. And I think that was in George's mind. But bro, there was so much cooking in that man's mind. You know what I mean? Like, he's the Vietnam's going on. He's reading Jack Kirby comics. There's all sorts of stuff baking up in there. I mean, like Dark Side and High Father, and the Dark Side. I mean, look, just read it. It's fascinating stuff out there. But my point is, the continuity of these decisions, the continuity of this trilogy will be decided by JJ in the last installment. And I think that the most important thing to this story was Kylo and Ren, their relationship, what that's going to mean for Star Wars as we move forward. So that part of it was amplified. They sort of had to dance around it. There's all these interviews and them talking about it and sort of dancing around the thing. Like Adam Driver has done a lot of cool interviews talking about how he's like, well, we sort of had to dance around this whole Rey and Kylo thing from the beginning. And now they don't have to anymore. It's sort of out there in the open. And so I think Ryan's focus was on that. And also, I don't know if he thought he might have been doing JJ a favor, but JJ sets up these mystery boxes and then he's terrible at paying them off. And so Ryan's solution to that may have literally been like, I'm gonna rip open all your mystery boxes and burn what's inside. And remember when JJ said, like, when I read the script of The Last Jedi, I wish that I had written it. I can't decide whether he's saying that because he would have written it differently, or whether he's saying I wish I would have had the goal to just subvert. That's not what it's about. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so, as far as that point is concerned, I definitely, it's a problem. The connectivity between 1 and 2 is a problem, but not in the same way that some people are saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fair. That's absolutely fair.
Yeah. But I will say this. I think that's the main problem. Like when because I broken it down, we've done a lot of coverage on it. That's probably the issue that I think needs to be addressed the most. And you know what? Even beyond it, if we want to, let me pour the haterade on just a little bit here. This is more of a flying casual. And I know James is watching this being like, come on, finish it. James, just hop on the Skype call and get on here, baby. Let's go. But my thing is this. Beyond just doing that, there's a hint to me of negligence with the ancillary material to the point of almost disrespect. If you are going to make this canon in a way where people have to absorb ancillary stuff to get the full picture, then it better be rewarded in the films. And I'll just say this. Disney, you need to fix that. You need to fix it ASAP. Because why would I buy these comics? Like the Phasma book makes her into a badass. And they don't pay that off. You know what I mean?
Not at all.
They don't pay that off. So, yeah. So there's a problem there. But let me get into my final point. This is the reason why the film is so effing fantastic. And this is going to be kind of a weird point to get to, but the controversy, the split in the fandom, the exposure that the film is getting on social media is all part of the plan. Because Star Wars, although very popular, look, we all knew The Force Awakens was going to make so much money because it's the first in so long. People complain about how it's derivative. People complain about how Star Wars is the same old thing. And before The Last Jedi, when you really took an honest look at what the future of Star Wars was going to be, you could have made the argument that it's going to be the same old record spun by your favorite DJ for the rest of the time. And not only did we smash that record, but I am so pumped about whatever record they put on next. I think that the meta, I just think that Ryan is such a genius with the story that he decided to tell, with the place and time that we are at right now. We're going to look back in this because media is changing drastically, super drastically. You could have almost made the argument that just looking at like diminishing returns and stuff like that, that like if we would have been handed a different Last Jedi, nobody really would have cared about Episode 9. And let me just say this too. The film's a great ride. Casuals, mostly, for the most part, love this film. I think one of the reasons that when you look at like Marvel versus DC, and why those films are so different, it's because you can take people that aren't even hardcore to a Marvel film. Like I took my my sister and her husband to go see Thor Ragnarok last time I was in Pittsburgh, and they loved it. And me as a hardcore fan, I love loving the movie and being able to share that experience with other people. I think that's part of it. That's innate into the fandom, right? And so for casual people, like, look, I'll just be real with you guys. I have so many new subscribers and fans on YouTube because of what happened in this movie. A lot of them arguably female, you know, with the Reylo thing. A lot of people are coming in, a lot of females coming in. And for the most part, I mean, there's hardcore female fans that are coming to my channel. And I just think that there's this weird thing going on right now where we're like, well, you don't know these toys, so you can't play with them. Yo, I want everybody to want to play with the Star Wars toys. I want to sit in the sandbox with the entire classroom and just geek out about Star Wars together. And I think that what this film has accomplished for the brand is magnificent, because I think even the vocal venom and all of the hate and everything out there, it's I know it's hard to sort of wrap your head around, but it is a good thing. And so that's the last reason that I think that the film is great, because it's so aware. It's the film we needed. We needed this to happen for Star Wars to be successful moving forward. And that's my final point.
Yeah, it's interesting about the whole Rian Johnson thing. I should just reiterate what I was saying before about, like, you know, my point about Rian Johnson and, you know, hating Star Wars. That's not really what I meant. Like, you know, I don't think he hates Star Wars. I think he dislikes perhaps parts of Star Wars, or he wanted to change certain parts of Star Wars. But if he hated Star Wars, he would not be doing this new trilogy, right? He would have literally just taken this paycheck, which is probably a gigantic paycheck, and just went away and did whatever else he wanted. If he did not care about Star Wars, he would not be doing a new trilogy right now. So, but yeah, in terms of Rian Johnson and what he accomplished with this movie, I think I'd be maybe more interested in Episode 3 if he was doing it still. Because then at least he could close off his vision. And the fact that JJ's doing it now makes me worried for what he's going to do to maybe subvert Episode 8. And if he does something to subvert Episode 8, then I think that we're in bad shape for this trilogy. Because if we're just literally doing every movie's going to subvert the previous movie that came before it, then that's bad. I hope JJ doesn't do that, and he brings it just great. And
just briefly, I just don't think that's possible. I mean, A, that's not really the type of filmmaker JJ is. And B, I think Ryan was a perfect guy for the middle spot, because the middle spot is the one that can be crazy. You know what I mean? Like, the middle is the one that can be crazy. I mean, like, let's be real. And it's funny because we said stuff like this before The Last Jedi, and we were so wrong. But Rey's going to redeem him. I mean, that's the bottom line, right? Like, that's what's going to happen. Like, Rey's going to redeem him, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but that's the setup. You know what I mean?
You think Kylo is still redeemable?
Absolutely. When Luke says to Leia, he says, I can't save him. Yeah. He doesn't say he can't be saved. He says, I can't save him. And then she says, I know my son's really gone. And he says, no one's ever really gone. And that's the thing. So I think that once again, like, it's being set up in a way. I'll say this: the master stroke is the fact that you even asked that question. You know what I mean? The fact that we can have that doubt that it's even possible is what's going to make it compelling to watch. But yeah, I just wanted to briefly just address that. I think there's no way. Like, Ryan hasn't set Star Wars up to now all be like that. No, in fact, I think they'll course correct. I think his new trilogy will even have the reins sort of pulled back a bit, probably a little bit because of the backlash and different things like that. But that's okay. Like, that's okay. That's part of the journey that we're all on. And I think this was perfect because it's shaking everything up, man. It's everything. This is all people want to talk about. You know what I mean? Like, I'm having conversations with people about Star Wars that I would have never had conversations with about Star Wars. And I think that's just, cool.
Oh, yeah. And just to close things off, I guess, we had these sides, and, to close off why I believe that it is not a good movie is just simply, getting all into the subplot stuff. Again, like, I'm not going to deny that the Luke and Rey training stuff was pretty darn good. I think that just the fact that they did what they did with Snoke and the fact that their subplot was very poor. Canto Bite was just, for the most part, unwatchable. I found just the fact that, oh yeah, you go find this guy with this bloom, Maz Kanata. Why don't you just tell him his name, right? And we make things so much easier. But anyway, yeah, we didn't even get into that. But I think that for the most part, I think like majority of fans agree that that's a very weak part of the movie entirely. So again, that's not really worth entirely mentioning. I just believe that all this type of stuff really brings down the quality of the movie and just really hurts it. Even though they have all this great stuff, I think that all these negatives kind of outweigh the positive, in my opinion.
Well, I'll just say this. I think that the discourse has been really cool in this video. And I think that as opposed to trying to get people to see our side of things, I think maybe the best thing about the video we just did is that if people are just honest with themselves and watch it, I think they will sort of see different perspectives and perhaps be able to investigate truly how they feel. So, we open it up to the Senate, of course, as always, vote, the way that you feel. And hopefully Rob and I have done a service by trying to elaborate and sort of dissect these points.
No, yeah, absolutely. Comment below, guys. And again, keep it civil. If somebody's saying something that you don't agree with, then reply to them and just say, hey, I don't agree with this because of this and this and this and this.
Right.
Don't say, hey, don't go into name calling.
And beyond being civil, I think this is something else that no one's really saying online. Is like, just ignore them. They're trying to get you. They're trying to get your goat. Okay. I'm on social media a lot. I see a lot of this stuff. The people that allow the other people to get to them and then sort of retaliate, you're sort of doing it just as much. So, speak your piece about it. If people want to try to antagonize you, one of the things that I really try to do, because there's a lot of people that I know that hate the film, and I try to not be like, you're wrong, more be like, I see your perspective. Here's my perspective.
Yep. And that's the key to doing it, right? Even the people that are just like, hey, I love the film, and you people that don't like the film should like the film. And why don't you like the film, right? And the other way around too. No, just talk it through, understand each other's perspectives. And that's the best way you can do it. Because again, this is not a brutal movie. If this was Transformers The Last Night, I would have no reason to even talk about what's going on in Marky Mark's head and character in that head. The fact that I do believe Holdo is a poor character, but even though I can try to dissect what she's going on in her head, is I think way more thought than Michael Bay, really puts in any of his movies. And Rian Johnson put way more thought in this movie than the majority of people did.
Can we agree that the memes are fantastic? So like I've been sharing some of the best memes. Right. Oh my God, they are amazing. There's a lot of great ones. One of my new favorites is the sea cow, but with Kylo's head on top of it. Right. And it's like Rey's like, can you put a cowl on or something? And he's like, nope. And he's just the space cow.
Yeah, James sent me the one of the underwater cow with the scene from Meet the Parents.
Yes, yes. That one blew my mind.
I have nipples. Can you milk me? But yeah, there you go. Yeah. So there were our points, guys. Again, talk below and just talk. Don't go too far into it. Just say your points and stuff like that. Try to resort from name calling. So again, this is Vote No Confidence, a very long version of Vote No Confidence, but I think this topic served the length for sure.
I agree, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. Always.
Absolutely, always a pleasure. Josh, where can everybody find you?
You check out the Den of Nerds. Highly recommend that. Big year for the Den of Nerds planned. I know Rob's working on some Dragon Ball content, got some cool ideas. Yeah, it's just look, the thing with the Den of Nerds for me has always been like fan content made by fans for fans, and we're blowing that up in 2018. So I'm excited for that. Check it out. Yeah, and as always, thank you so much for having me, man.
Yeah, it was awesome. Great talking to you. I look forward to being more part of the Den of Nerd stuff. Myself, you can find me at Robert E. McDonald on both Twitter and Facebook. Download the Stardust app as usual. See my reactions there. And you can also watch myself and Josh on the Duel of the Fates that just came out
so
about
salty
a month ago.
That still. So salty. Yeah. How did you pull that date? Let's talk about this. Can we get this guy tested for performance enhancing drugs? How did you pull that date out, sir? That was incredible.
It was a funny thing. The only one was that I knew the year, and then I was an educated guess for the month, and then the day was just like, I'm gonna throw out a day because 30 days in November, just throw out a day, and that's all it worked. So
That's brutal.
Yeah, James has shown me some of the comments. Some people seem to think that I'm not that I'm cheating or whatnot.
No, he wasn't cheating. Yeah. Look, I could tell that with the delivery. The reason it's so shocking, and if you watch my reaction, everybody's reaction, the reason it's so shocking is because we knew he was guessing. You know what I mean? Like we knew.
No, yeah, and it's crazy. I would give me another day for something else. I had a day question when it was Force Friday on that year too, and I didn't get it. That was just an educated guess as well. So yeah, it was still fun though, and we'll be on more of these Duel of the Fates and stuff like that. And more Vote No Conferences to come. So absolutely check out the channel. More videos coming every other day, or a couple times, for several times a week. So it's awesome. And thanks for viewing this, guys. If you guys went through this entire marathon, then thank you for watching. I hope you guys understand what we were talking about, and may the force be with you.
Always.
Hey scumbags, thanks for watching. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up on our video. As always, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Rebel Scum Podcast, for all the latest videos.